Okay, let's see if this is going to work on the YouTube, because I messed up when I set it up. So I hope it actually, sorry. Okay. It actually streams. Okay, let's bring up the page. Oh, it is streaming good, perfect. Hold on, let me see. Kitzur. Okay, here we go. Okay. Let's see. Hold on, we're holding law number. Okay, it's coming in. So we're holding law number. Hold on a second. Law number 4 in the laws of the 4 areas for Shabbos. So we learned about the Rishus Harabim, the public domain. We learned about the Rishus HaYachid, the private domain. So those are the 2 main ones. Means private is private, public is public. So those are the first 2. Those are the first ones we learned. And now we're going to learn about the 2 question ones. Hey, Aaron, the 2 ones that are complicated, but actually the ones that actually we deal with most of the time. One is the Carmelis. The Carmelis is Makim She'ein Hiluch L'Rabim. It's not defined as a place where the people go. V'gam Eini Mukav B'Mechitzas Kiroi doesn't have proper separation to make it a private domain. So it's not a public domain, but it's not a private domain. What would be an example to a typical Carmelist? Now again, the law is going to end up, so before we get to questions, the law is going to finish off saying that it's very hard to know exactly what is a Carmelist. But a Carmelist in general, the most defined would be Sadais, a field. Why? A field is open area, but it's not public. You don't have 600,000 people, you don't have large roads, nahar or a river. It's a river that has 10 tvachim. Again, 10 tvachim is about 10 fistfuls deep. And it's wide 4 tvachim. So it's its own, so to say, Howard, you just posted on the group that you see. Is everything coming? Is it streaming okay on YouTube? Please confirm again. So if it has 10 tfachim deep, 10 fists deep, and 4 fists wide, it's its own domain, but it's not a public domain. It's not a private domain. It's its river. So that's another example. Or he gives a third example, meva'ois. Mavis is like alleyways. Aaron, we didn't do this law yet, right? I don't think we did.
No, we didn't do this law.
Okay, so muvais and alleyways. Sheishtam shalish mechitzas. So they have 3 kind of alleyways closed up on 3 sides, but it's open, totally flush on the 3rd side, totally open. No. We're going to see what could close that alleyway up to make it private. Or it's the vinius. What is an itztavinius? It's makim shlefei chanus. It's like, if you have a market. So there's before a store, the opening of the store, kind of anyone could walk there, but it's not really, because of it's made up for a store, it's kind of doesn't have that kind of traffic, so to say, of your regular public domain. That's where the sellers sit. Or itztaba, what's an itztaba? It's makim shemanichim alav pragmatia. So the itztaba is the place that is the merchants the pillars, he says, in the public domain, that where they put their stuffs, they put their goods. So before the beams, it's if you go to Jerusalem, and if you're in Jerusalem, it could be in Rome as well. You see the old Roman markets, so they have the pillars. So around the pillars where people would put their stuff. So again, it doesn't have the access of the public. It kind of privatizes it a bit, but it's not a private domain. So that's why it's a Carmelis. These are all examples of a Carmelis, which it's not a public, not private, but it's not a nomad. It's not a makom tur. It's not a free space, That means it's not considered a domain. It's a domain, but you can't consider it public or private. He gives an example. It has to again have a space of 4 fists, and it has to be and it's kind of a little lifted up above 3 from the main public domain, kind of like a little sidewalk, up to 10 tvachim. Again, there is no such thing as a public domain above 10 tvachim. So once you get out of the 10 tvachim, let's just assume 10 tvachim is 3 feet or a little under 3 feet. So anything above that is already out of the public domain. So here it's not, but it's not above that. So it's a little bit, it's above 3 tvachim, which we said in last week's class, that if it's 3 tvachim, if it's within 3 tvachim, like a what do we call it? You have the in the roads, what do they call them? Potholes. So a pothole is usually a small little thing. That's not, you can't say that comes out of the public domain. Or if you have a space that's 4 by 4 inches, arm fists, but it's not surrounded by gates or separation of 10 tvachim. Vitel, or you have a like a little heap. It has a space of 4 by 4. V'goiva, and it's above the public domain. So it's in the public domain, but it's above 3 tvachim, so kind of you can't walk on it. It's not like a little pothole that you just step into, because it's 3 tvachim is 1, 2, 3 is almost a foot, right? So it's 3 tvachim, it's kind of lifted up, but like I say, like a sidewalk, but it's higher than a sidewalk. So it's 3 v'adasara, but it's up to 10. If it would be 4 by 4 above 10 tvachim, then it's a private domain. So that's what we learned last week. A karmelis is basically, let's just break it down. A public domain is a place where there's a public, where you have the 600,000 or the wide roads, whatever we learned last week that defines a public domain. If you need the 600,000 people, then any place that doesn't have 600,000 people is not a public domain. But let's even say it's a place that has 600,000 people. But it's like a little hill, it's a little hump that is 3 tvachim above, so the public can't walk there. It has 4 tvachim, so it's a space. But it doesn't remove itself from the public domain to become a private domain because it's not high 10 tvachim. It has to be high 10 tvachim to be a private domain. So all these little places that kind of are in the public but are separating themselves from the public domain. Again, if you hold you need 600,000 people to make a public domain. So like the fields, it's not because it's 3 tvachim high or 4 tvachim or it's because there's no public there. So it's not a public domain. And it's not a private domain, so it has a din v'karmelis. But you have also within the public domain that there's these separations that are within the public domain that become a karmelis. Or you have a bar going the other direction. So a tail is going upwards. A bar is protruding inwards, a pit, which is arba al arba. Again, arba al arba means a space. If it doesn't have 4 arm fists by 4 arm fists, it's not a space. So it's a space. However, it's deep. If it would be only deep 1 tefach, it would be nullified to the public domain. But it's deep 3 tefachim, which is about a foot. That's not part of the traffic. No one would walk in there. You would hurt yourself. So it's public. So it's 3 tefachim deep, but it's not 10 tefachim. If it would be 10 tefachim, then it would be a reshus hayachid. So again, it's less than 10 tefachim. And then the Kitzur says there's many different things that define a karmelis. Ulashin karmelis, what does the word mean? What's the word karmelis mean? Ulashin rach v'mol. The word karmelis means rach and mol, which means neither wet nor dry. Not a reshus yachid, not a reshus rabim. Lo lach v'lo yavish. El beinini, it's kind of in between. It doesn't have the proper separation. If you would have 10 tefachim separation, then it would cut itself off and be a private domain. It can't be a public domain. Why? Okay, this is the definition here. The public don't go there. So therefore, any place that the public don't go, that's not a public, it's not a cut-off space within the public domain, but it just never became a public domain. Like the fields, the first characteristics, the fields and the rivers. So it never became public domain. So, but it's not a private domain. So basically, there's two fields of the karmelis. There's the karmelis in a reshus rabim. Let's say you have that big street or whatever, big market that has a lot of people. but these kind of where the storefronts are, these are all places that are kind of cutting out of the public domain to kind of make it into a third entity, not Rishus Yachid, not Rishus Rabbim. And then you have spaces that were never Rishus Rabbim. The public don't go there enough to make it Rishus Rabbim. And it's not a private domain, doesn't have the fences around it. So what is it? It's a karmelis. And therefore, we're going to learn the halachas, what are you allowed to do and not allowed to do in a karmelis. So biblically, the Rishus Rabbim is the real biblical problem. The karmelis is not so, it doesn't have the restrictions of a Rishus Rabbim, and therefore there's more maneuver room when it comes to certain questions. We'll get to whether it's the Erev, etc. But it's definitely its own domain, and it's a Rishus l'Shabbos. Like we say, Arba Rishus l'Shabbos. There's 4 entities of Shabbos of space. And so now we learned the third domain. We had the private domain, the public domain, and now we have the third domain, which is the karmelis. Number 5. Any questions on this before we go for? Oh, but let's turn to the footnotes. 22. Okay, he's just going to quote references. 23, also references, okay? Because he's basically bringing us the definition from the Mishnah. Everything clear so far on the third level? Okay, let's move to the 4th one, and this is going to finish this chapter. Ezu makom p'tor. What is considered a makom p'tor? Makom p'tor means a place that is permissible, a permissible place. Now, is called makom b'rishus Rabbim if it's a place in a public domain. She'ein bo arba la'arba. So now it doesn't have 4 by 4. So it doesn't have a definition of space. We'll go over mishalish. It's 3 tefachim above from the ground. So it's lifted itself up from the ground, but it's not a space because it's not 4 by 4. 4 by 4 is the flat surface space. And ein oy bar, or if it's deep, she'ein by arba doesn't have 4 by 4, so it's not its own space inwards. But amek mishalish lamata, but it's still deep 3. If it'd be less than 3, then it'd be nullified to the public domain. Or if it has 4 by 4, but it's not surrounded by walls that would separate it, so to say, and it's above 3 tefachim high. Now he says, what is a makom p'tor? A makom p'tor is only these kind of little places, and we're going to see later what the examples of a makom p'tor. Let's see, you could have a little. Let's say you have a 2 by 4 that's just standing there in the streets, and you could put something on top of it. It's a 2 by 4 or a 4 by 4. A 4 by 4 inches is not 4 by 4 tefachim. So if it's, let's say, even if it's within 10 tefachim, if it's above 10 tefachim, it's anyways a makom p'tor. But even if it's beneath 10 tefachim, it's still a makom p'tor because it doesn't have 4 by 4. So therefore, if you're in the public domain, unless you put something on top of it, you haven't taken something out of the public domain and put it into a new domain. It means there's a space that the Torah says is kind of not a space. It's not a space, which means that you're removing something. We're going to learn that what is the problem? What happens when we have these 4 spaces? The 3 of them, the public domain, the private domain, and the karmelis, you're not allowed to move from one rishus to the next. You can't take something from your house and put it into the public domain, or from the public domain into your house, or to your private yard, or to a karmelis. But a makom p'tor is p'tor. So it's a makom, but it's patur. So it's not as if you're transferring something from a place to another place, because it doesn't really have a definition of a place because it's lacking 4. So he says again, what is the definition of makom p'tor called? B'rishus Rabbim, it's in Rishus Rabbim. It doesn't have 4 by 4, but it's over 3. If it would be lower than 3, then it would be Rishus Rabbim. So if you would be in your house or in a private domain and reach your hand from your house holding something and put it on something that doesn't have 4 by 4, but it's less than 3 tefachim from the ground, and that's a public domain, or even a karmelis, then you transferred it to the karmelis because it's nullified to the karmelis. But if it's above 3 tefachim, so then you didn't put it anywhere. So it says, here he says there's a special rule here, where the makom p'tor is more stringent in the karmelis. Meaning to say, if you have a 2 by 4 that's standing in a karmelis, and you are standing in a private domain, and you put it onto that, then you did transfer domains. So basically, the makom p'tor very rarely exists because we just said that the Rishus Rabbim very rarely exists. the public domain very rarely exists. So the Makom P'tur very rarely exists because the Makom P'tur is only in the Rosh Hashanah. So any place that's a Carmelist, let's say outside Barbara's house, which there's no way that Bainbridge Island is a public domain, and even questionable if Brooklyn is. So where Aaron lives, and maybe Rebecca's in Manhattan, maybe it's more for sure. But if you have a place like that, you can't take your stick. You can't stick from your house, which is a private domain, and put something on a little 2x4 that you say, well, it's a Makom P'tur. It's not, because your place is a Carmelist. Again, because of all these questions, we have to be very careful with Shabbos. That's the idea, really. Okay, so let's just learn the footnote number 24. Again, that's just a reference. Okay, before we continue to the next chapter, which is going to go into now the laws of how we deal with the different domains, are there any questions? Okay. Now we're going to learn the laws. Chapter number 82. So chapter number 81 just defined to us what are the domains. Chapter number 82. So it says like this. Now, what are the laws that we know that these domains? So anything that's a public domain or a Carmelist. Again, the Carmelist is a place that's open to the public, but doesn't become a public domain. That's really the definition. It means the public are going there, but not in the numbers, or it's kind of cut off, or it's a little lifted up, but it's it's open to the public. So if you have a Reshus Rabim or Carmelist, what are the laws? Asir letaltel shum davar abramus. Number one law on Shabbos: you may not carry 4 arm lengths, not fist lengths, arm lengths in a Carmelist. If you're holding your bag or something, and you start walking 4 arm lengths, you didn't go from one domain to the next. You're within the domain. So you are transgressing the Shabbos by carrying 4 amas in a Reshus Rabim, a public domain, or the Carmelist. Bein laseis oisai, whether you carry something for 4 amas, for 4 arm lengths, or lizrei oisai, or if you throw something that far. Bein lahoishit oisai, or to or handing it over in above 4 amas. Beyond 4 amas. And here he adds something else. They kind of, where people think that you could just walk kind of slowly but make up 4 amas, that's also not permitted. So we're going to get into that a little more in details. But try to think by walking slowly and you continue walking, would make it as if you didn't move 4 amas. Doesn't mean you have to jump 4 amas, but just walking, even if you did it slowly, still you moved 4 amas and it's prohibited. Okay, footnote number 1. The Amar, again, what is this length of an Amar? We learned this before, is referred to as a distance from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. So that would be from here all the way till here, right? It's obviously longer than a foot. Each person measures this according to his own Amma. Okay, so here he says that according to the Shulchan Aruch, how do you know? So you just take your own arm. Though usually we like to say there's a defined amount of centimeters for that, but if you just use your own arm, that would give you a definition of what is 4 amas. So if you did 4 arm lengths, which is, again, I would say about, usually depending on the person, but about, let's say 18 inches or so, so then you would have you would know what it is. Now, here he says the idea of the 4 amma space. The 4 amma space is not from, let's say, north to east or east to west, north to south or east to west. The 4 amas is, he says, it's an important law on Shabbos, is like this. It says, not 4 amas, but a diagonal of 4 amas square, which would mean, i.e., 5.6 amas. Also see Mishnah Berurah. So it's circular. So if you did a diagonal 4 amas, it gives you a circle dimension of 5.6 amas. So the actual space is a little bigger than what we would think. Mm-hmm. So you would have to figure out the round space, which is basically based on 5.6. If you did 5.6 arm lengths, that would be the space that's considered your space. And if you leave that space carrying something on Shabbos, hey Judith, we're learning about the different reshuyos of Shabbos. So then you would be going out of the space of your 4 amas. Basically, what is the idea of 4 amas? 4 amas is kind of That's a person's mental space. When you say you're in my space, halachically, that's within 4 amos. They say you can't when it's forbidden to be next to someone, whatever that reason would be. Let's say you take a vow not to be near someone, or you put someone into cherem, what have you. So the idea is you can't be within 4 amos of that space. A person's space is 4 amos. So he's saying it's not 4 amos, it's 4 amos circular, which would mean diagonal, which means really 5.6 amos from corner to corner. Okay. Number 3 is. Where do we know this from? Where's the source of Torah that a person cannot carry in a public domain 4 amos? Because the verse in Torah says, in Vayakal, I think, a person shouldn't go out of his space. When it says don't go out of your space, we learn what is space 4 amos. A person's space is 4 amos. And this is talking about the desert. The desert is a public domain. So from this we learn a person can't go out of their space more than 4 amos. So basically, the transgression is because a person's space is 4 amos, and because the person's space is 4 amos, and Moshe says, "Don't leave your space." So from this, we learn that a person cannot carry in a public domain, and the desert was a public domain, like we've learned. So therefore, we learn from there that the person on Shabbos is not allowed to carry more than 4 amos. I just want to quote you the pasuk, if I could catch it fast enough. I'll have to look it up. Where the verse is. It's either in Kisisa or I think it's in the Yaakov, or could they? Okay. So it says like this. Let's continue. Law number 2. Beis. Asur laseis oilizroik lahaishit shum davar mishus yachad ram, or the karmelis. Now comes the next thing. So in the public domain or the karmelis, you cannot move out of your space, and your space is a circle is 4 amos, which is a circle of 5.6 amos. So that's if you have something in your pocket or carrying something, it's forbidden. And there's what's called akira vanacha, which means you pick something up and you put it down. That's the basic idea of moving something. Now, you can have also, the next transgression is the movement of domain to domain. That doesn't need 4 amos. That's not defined by 4 amos. That's defined even if you're sending right by a public domain and you put something right down in a private domain or vice versa, you've transferred domains. So that's not dependent on 4 amos. That's dependent on going from one domain to the next. So it goes, Aser laseis, you can't carry, oil lizrik, or to throw, oil lahoishit, or to pass over, shum davar, anything, from private domain to public domain, oil karmelis, or to karmelis. Again, the karmelis would be any place that's outside your house, and we're going to learn where it starts. V'chein also, rabim, or mikarmelis, or yachid. You can't move something from a public domain or the karmelis into a private domain. V'chein rabim karmelis, and here he adds something also, which is, again, this is what makes it so hard, because it's very hard to know what a Rishus Harabim is, what a public domain is. And he says, because the karmelis is not really a public domain, it's just an open domain, it's that third space, so therefore you're not allowed to carry something from a public domain to a karmelis. So if, let's say, you were in Fifth Avenue, to carry something from Fifth Avenue to a side street is moving it from the public domain to the karmelis. So also, that like be going into a mobile, an alleyway, right? If, let's say, you're walking, you're standing in a public domain, and there's an alleyway off, which is a karmelis. If you're standing there to put something in, it's open space. The public go there. It's just not. It's kind of narrower. It's more narrow and less inhabited, or less people, less traffic, because it's an alleyway. So then it's also forbidden to move something from Rishus Haram to karmelis. Vice versa. If you're standing in an alleyway to move something into a public domain, you can't say, well, I'm in a public domain anyways. And I didn't carry 4 amos, but you did. You transferred from the karmelis to the public domain. Aval makim petur. Again, the makim petur, we said, is that free space, and it's only a free space where in a Rishus Harabim. You could you could move something or things from a makim petur if it's less than 4 amos, into the Rishus Harabim. So it says, "Aval b'makom p'tur muter lahaitzi," to take out from a b'makom p'tur or lahachmis, or to bring in to Rishus Yachid or to Rishus Harabim or to Karmelis, or from them onto b'makom p'tur. So putting it on again, there is no b'makom p'tur in a Karmelis, but if you're in an alleyway and there's, let's say, I don't know, I'm not sure if a fire hydrant is considered a makom p'tur. Possibly it is, because I don't think a fire hydrant is 10 tefachim high, and I don't believe, at least most, and I don't think a fire hydrant has 4 tefachim. And if you have a fire hydrant not in the Carmelis, but in the public domain, you have to remember, the problem is that most fire hydrants are in the Carmelis. So but in theory, if there was a fire hydrant, and if I'm right to assume that a fire hydrant is a makom p'tur, so if you were standing, let's say, in a Carmelis, in an alleyway, and you picked up something and put it on the fire hydrant, even then, so then that'd be okay, because you didn't transfer into public domain, because it's a makom p'tur. Or if you were standing in a private domain and you stuck and you reached over and put something on the fire hydrant, or if you took something from the fire hydrant and brought it inside, you haven't transferred reshusim. You haven't transferred domains, because where it was resting or where you put it is not considered a domain. It's considered what we call free space. Again, we can't really act on these laws because the reshuyuses are not clear. It's not really clear what is a Rishus Ra and what's a Carmelis. And if there's no makom p'tur in a Carmelis, so the fire hydrant in a makom p'tur, so for instance, where does it become extreme? If you were to take something from a fire hydrant in a Carmelis into your home, you're transferring Rishuses. If you're to take domains, if you're to take it from a fire hydrant to your home and the fire hydrant's in a public domain, so then you haven't transferred domains. The problem is it's not so clear if the fire hydrant is in a Carmelis or in a public domain. So therefore one can't assume to just take action based on what you think is a public domain, because it's not so simple if it's a public domain. And like you said in last week's class, it's very hard to find a public domain today. So therefore we have to be very careful. You can move it from the... Yes, Aaron.
The fire hydrant I checked is between 1.3 and 2.5 feet, the part above the ground.
And how wide is it?
I didn't ask that question. You didn't pose it. So
no, I'm saying it has to be less than 4 tefachim. If it would be 4 tefachim, I don't think it is square 4 tefachim.
1.3 to 2.5 high from the part that sticks out of the ground.
Yeah, I understand. So that's fine in the height, but it could be the space on top. And it also depends on not all fire hydrants are the same.
No, but that's why they give a range.
Right, so I'm saying, but let's say the top of it. Some fire hydrants, like in Israel, the fire hydrants are literally, like, I think if I remember correctly, literally just like a hose, like a metal pipe. In America, or at least in Seattle, there are these, big, New York also, these big pieces. So it could be those pieces, the top of it, although it kind of narrows on top, it kind of goes up in an A-frame shape. So it's hard. So it would be hard to figure if that would be fire hydrants and makom p'tur.
Classic fire hydrants in America all look roughly the same.
Yeah, but the thing is that most of the fire hydrants are not in the Rishus Rab.
What does that mean?
A public domain. They're in the private Carmelis, and the makom p'tur is only in the Rishus Rab. So if like I said, if there was, let's say, I don't know, if Ocean Parkway, and again, and I'm not sure if the sidewalks of Ocean Parkway are considered public domain. It could be those are like the storefronts.
So I'm going to explain this to you real quickly. The Sephardics believe that we can't make it on a roof because of all the openings, like you just said.
It's a public domain.
Okay, yeah, because too many openings. The Ashkenaz, a lot of them say you can carry, but there are some that say you can't because of the openings again.
Okay, so the question in Brooklyn is, I think Moshe Feinstein says he finds it very hard to make an Erev. They did make an Erev. Let's say there's certain places in Brooklyn that are very difficult to close off. But the question is, even if you don't make an Erev and you can't carry there, it's still a question of I have to check if the sidewalks in a public domain are considered part of the public domain. They're not 3 tefachim high. So they're not really, they're kind of, but they don't have the traffic of the actual street. So it could be it has like the laws of, hold on, Barbara, it could be it has the laws of like the storefronts, And then most fire hydrants are on the sidewalk, and then it would be a carmelist, and then there would be no makom patur where the fire hydrant is. Yes, Barbara.
So I was pick Hebrew on Sunday with a woman in who's in Jerusalem, and she was telling me about how she was carrying on Shabbos, and I said, "Well, you were carrying?" And she says, "Well, it's Jerusalem. We have in a roof. The whole city is in a roof. So how would this apply? Because aren't there public domains there in Jerusalem?"
No, there's absolutely no. Anyone who's driven in Jerusalem, maybe, but then the highways don't cut out. Maybe Begin Highway, but then the highways don't really cut through. So there's they don't enclose the highways. So no, again, like that's what it said in last week's class. It's very hard. You'd find it on Fifth Avenue, Ocean Parkway. I don't think there's any public domain in Seattle. There's no.
Okay.
Even let's say Martin Luther King Way, which is a pretty wide street, or Lake City Way. I don't think those are either Rosh Hashanah. Like
Okay.
like six lanes on each side with major traffic. So there's very few public domains in the world.
Okay.
Maybe London has, maybe France has, etc. Okay, so he says like this. Levad, there's only one problem. You have to be careful. If you pick up something from a makom patur, so yes, you haven't transferred it into public domain, but once you're holding it, you can't move forward amos. So that's still the problem. So you can't walk with it just because you were permissible to pick it up or put it down. Well, if now this is where he finishes off, which is the most important part for us, which is because there's just so many differences. Mahi Rosh Hashanah, what is exactly a public domain? Mahi Carmelis, and what is a Carmelis? Mahi Rosh Hashanah, what's exactly a private domain? It's not so simple. Like Barbara was saying, in her backyard, it's kind of cut off, but maybe it's not cut off. Unless we were actually very clear in what we wrote about besides what we mentioned in the previous chapter, there's so many other questions that could arise. If there's a city that does not have an Erev, if you're not certain, you have to be very careful. Do not move anything from one point to the next point after 5 amas, because you're not sure if that place is private, public, or if you're removing it from a private place to a public place. So all these questions are changing domains. So again, like I said, because we don't even know if for instance, if you were to take it from a fire hydrant, it's on the sidewalk, it could be that's a carmelis, and then you're moving it to Rosh Hashanah, you're not allowed to move from it. There is no makom to turn a carmelis. So because of that, just don't move anything, basically. Unless you're certain what's the definition of this space. If you're not certain, you have to assume it's its own domain and do not carry based on any of your own assumptions. That's what he finishes off this important law with. Okay, are there even any footnotes here? No. Okay, now he says, what does it mean to transfer something from one place to the next? When you take something from where it's sitting, let's say you pick up a pot or the newspaper is lying on the floor. So when you pick it up, so you take the article from the place where it's lying. That's called akira. You're picking it up. You're lifting it out off the floor. And you put it down. It's called hanacha. So he's giving us the terminology. Akira and hanacha. Akira is to pick it up. Hanacha is to put it down, to place it down. And also, if you pick up something without putting it down, or you put something down but you didn't pick it up, asr lasis, you're not allowed to do it. Means although you see Shabbos right? We have two. For instance, what would be, there's many examples. If you open up the Mishnah Shabbos, you start right away with the first parak. It gives us all the scenarios where a person could pick something up and not put it down. And someone could put it down and not pick it up. Right? So, for instance, if someone placed something in your hand, you didn't pick it up because it was placed in your hand. But if you put it down, you put it down. So nevertheless, even if to pick it up and put it down for sure is a problem. But even if you put it down and you haven't picked it up, or you pick it up, move it into the next domain, but didn't put it down, but someone takes it from your hand, that's also a problem. This is where it becomes important. Let's say the mailman comes, right? The mailman could take the mail. Well, you knock on the door, right? And let's say he's standing in a domain that's not private. It's a carmelist, it's an open space, and he's giving you the mail. You can't take it from him because although he's picked it up and reached over into the next domain, but by taking you're doing ganacha, you're putting it down. Or if a person comes in to pick up a package, let's say the mailman comes to pick up a package or whatever. We're not going to go into the laws of the mail because that's a question of muksa, but we're talking about just in general the concept. So you can't pick it up and give it to the Gentile, even though the Gentile's hand, where the Gentile himself is in the private domain and he's going to walk out because you did that kiro, you did the picking up. So therefore he said like this. Let's start again. You cannot give something to a Gentile. That he's now going to take it and leave. For instance, even to take the trash out of the garbage can and hand it to a Gentile to take it outside of the private domain of your house to throw in the garbage can, you're not allowed to do that because you're doing the picking up. So here, this doesn't have to just be a public domain, it can be a carmelist. And if your garbage cans are in the front yard, in most houses, that's a carmelist. Because when you picked it up and handed it to the Gentile, although the Gentile is standing in a private domain when you handed it to them, but they're going to now walk and go outside with that article. You did the picking up. It's the Gentile who himself or herself is allowed to transfer domains. They don't have an obligation to keep Shabbos, like we said in last class, but you can't be involved in them transgressing and in them doing things that would be prohibited for you to do on Shabbos. So therefore, the Gentile has to take the article by themselves. Let's say the Gentile is handing you something. You can't take it from his hand, even if he walks into the house. You complete the movement, although you're stayed in a private domain. The Gentile walks into your house, holding something, gives it to you. It hasn't totally transferred from domain to domain until it's put down. And by you taking it and putting it down, you kind of complete the transaction. So you're placing it down. The Gentile has to put it down on his own. Where does this come? You have to be very careful. In a situation where let's say you have a baby that's going to be pushed by the Gentile woman to shul. Why? For a bris. That's a case where it'd be acceptable. Put a pin on that, whatever's going through your mind for a second. You can't hand the baby to let's say you have a Gentile woman who's about to push a Jewish child. She has to pick up the child herself from the floor or whatever, from the bed, and put it into the carriage. You cannot hand the baby to the Gentile woman. When she comes into the private domain after she walked the baby, you can't take it from her hand. She has to put the baby down. If she comes into the courtyard or into the area of the shul, only when she comes in and she puts it down, then the Jewish woman can take it. It says you could look in chapters Shin Zayin, Shin Chaf Hey, 3:7, 3:25, 3:46, 3:47, 3:49 in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, after this class, we're going to stop. And after this law, we're going to just do the footnotes and open up to some questions before we finish the class. I want to just bring up one topic that may get people a little tickled. Let's just go. Number 4 is, according to the Yavitz, what are we talking about? It's talking about even disloading without depositing, or depositing without disloading is forbidden. According to the Yavitz, this is a deraisa. It's not rabbinic, it's biblical prohibition. But most other authorities disagree and maintain that it's not deraisa, it's not biblical. If you only do the putting down, the disloading, what does he call it? Disloading or the lifting, but it's still transgression by the rabbis. Number 5. Number 5 is, okay, just a reference. Hey, Danny, number 6 is, what are we talking about? Yes. If a non-Jew carries him to the synagogue to be circumcised. Then she herself picks up the baby in the house, and when she comes to the courtyard or the lobby of the synagogue, she should put down, and then the Jewish should take it after she puts the baby down. Okay, so number 6 is now, this is the question. The question is what I want to get to. It is forbidden to bring the baby to the synagogue through areas that that have no Erev, even through a non-Jew, even if the non-Jewish woman is pushing the baby, because it is possible to have the circumcision done at home. No one says you have to do the circumcision in the shul. And it's often done in the home because of cold weather. It's not good to take the baby out. Or for similar reasons, see Mishnah Berurah. So he's bringing down that really only in extreme circumstances can the Gentile woman push the baby. This opens the question. We're going to stop here, the class, the laws, but we want to open the question, which
Let me
is...
just mention one thing. In Brooklyn, for the Sephardics, I know this is fact, that a lot of the shuls have a room, which is maybe the same room they use for the bridal room, where the parent, the wife, the mother, will bring the baby before Shabbos, and they'll sleep there overnight so they can have a proper bris in the morning on Shabbos, and they don't have to carry. And they'll provide them food and everything.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's lovely. Well, the Ken Yerba, that's very, I actually, it's the first time hearing of that. That's very lovely. It's a lovely idea and service that the synagogue does. That's beautiful. The question that we're coming to, because it's, I don't know, I'll be honest, I've never really dealt with it myself, but obviously the question is of a Gentile pushing a Jew in a place where there's no Erev on Shabbos. That people have sometimes the baby's being pushed by a Gentile. They'll go eat out on Friday night or Shabbos day, and the baby's in the carriage, and there's no Erev, and they'll have a Gentile push the child. And from the Shulchan Aruch, what we just learned now in the Kitzur, he says that even the Mishnah Berurah doesn't even allow it for a bris because it's not necessary. You don't have to do the bris in the house, in the shul. You could do it in the house. And even for a bris, it's only, according to those who allow it, only allowed because it's a mitzvah. But what about having, like it says, the halachic analysis, having a goy, a non-Jew, pushes your stroller on Shabbos? And this is from Rabbi Shlomo Segel. He was my teacher once. And he asked the question, remember the Crown Heights Bezdin addresses the following question. May one instruct a non-Jew on Shabbos to wheel a baby carriage in the street where the parents want to visit friends or family or eat to the Shabbos there, or they wish to participate in a bar mitzvah, such, etc., sheva brachas? And the answer is, I'm not going to go through all the details, but his answer is that the prohibition of instructing a non-Jew to do work for a Jew is explained at great length in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch in many different chapters, including the comments in the footnotes. The 3 reasons are given for this prohibition, and he goes into the reason, and his conclusion is, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, so I have to go say slichas, but his conclusion is, therefore, from all of the above, it is obvious that instructing a non-Jew on Shabbos to wheel a child in a carriage through the streets is forbidden, and especially according to the Alter Rebbe in chapter 325, where he wrote, one should be stringent in our type of public domain. Although 600,000 people do not pass in it every day, a person may say, well, it's not a really Rishus Rabbim, it's a Karmel list, and a Karmel list is not halachically a public domain. But nevertheless, he says you should be careful. It is considered a public domain from Torah, and in a status of public domain, one cannot permit it, even if it was for the sake of a mitzvah. Therefore, one should alert people. One second. Who figure that this is permitted, they should refrain from doing it on Shabbos. Again, I see it all the time. I'm not sure. Maybe people disagree with Rabbi Segel. I didn't study it enough.
But many rabbis in Brooklyn that I've learned from, and I've heard this from, say if what's considered carrying a baby. So they say if the baby can't walk, then everything you said holds true. But if the baby can walk a certain amount of a percent, I don't know exactly what that percent is. I think they said it, but I don't remember, so don't quote me. So I'm not going to say. But if they can walk a certain percent, and then they get tired and they start to crab, then you could pick them up and carry them.
Okay, that's another question. That's called the Chai Noises Atzmi. That's the idea that a person that is alive is not carrying, because if I were to carry you, Aaron, if I was able to, then that's not called carrying because a chai is atzmai. But that's only talking about a chai that, like you said, could walk. So that's a different scenario. But over here, we're talking about the question of just straight up pushing a carriage in Shabbos. We're talking about an infant, a baby. A can't walk. B, there's a carriage involved.
Oh, most of the people who are Sephardic, because they don't believe in the roof whatsoever, 90% of them that I know, they just rather stay at home on Shabbos than even take the baby out.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I'm just telling you that I hear what you're saying. I'm just telling you that there's no basis for I haven't seen it. I looked online. I try to find where because I see people doing it all the time. People have someone pushing their baby for them. It just seems that it's again another Rav that I could say good enough to say that I dealt through it, but the little bit that I checked online that has I guess there must be some yesod that some people base on, maybe saying it's a Carmelist, but based on Rabbi Segal's ruling, and he's the Rav of Crown Heights, one of the Rabbanim of Crown Heights, he says there's no such thing that to have a Gentile push. Now you could have a scenario where there's an Eruv, and some people don't want to keep the Eruv. Thanks, Judith, for joining. It's nice when you come. All right, she's gone. There are some places where there are an Eruv, and people don't want to use the Eruv, or it's not the best Eruv, so then it's a little different. But if there's absolutely no Eruv, again, I don't know the Yisod for it. I could check again with my brother-in-law who's a Rav to find out some more. But either way, any other questions aside for
But
that?
couldn't you, well, just one thing before she answers her question, couldn't you, before Shabbos, set it all up? Because I know in some of the rich people, they have people either living in or come every day who are like caretakers for their kids. And I see, you could tell because the black person pushing a white baby. And they're pushing it. And sometimes the mother's walking behind them or in front of them.
Again, that if there's an Eruv is something else. If there's no Eruv,
No,
it's
these are the Sephardics who don't believe in the Aruch.
okay. But that's different. Not believing in the Eruv, that's not believing. You have to you're using the
Their
wrong.
rabbis don't say whatever the
Yeah,
reason
you
is.
have to be Aaron. You have to be very careful in the
Okay,
terminology.
they say the Sephardics say that there's a reason why they don't want to sign off
Okay,
on the Aruch.
so if you have that, they're saying is the Eruv is kosher, but just we don't want we are suggesting to our community not to use the Eruv. Then it would be different if there's someone a Gentile pushing the
Well,
baby.
what? Just answer
But
this
if
one.
you're talking about a case where there's no kosher Eruv, it's different.
Okay, but let me ask you this, because they always say there's a Sephardic Eruv, and a lot of rabbis say it's not kosher. Okay, and
again.
then there's a
So if a person says
Ashkenaz
if a person's
Eruv.
if there's opinion that says that this is not a kosher Eruv, then it's a question if there's an Eruv or not. But if there's opinion to say if they're saying is that the Eruv is it has legitimacy, but we're not going to keep by it. We're
No,
going
no,
to be
no. What my question is, just listen real carefully. The Sephardics don't want to. A lot of the rabbis say the Sephardic Eruv is not kosher. The Ashkenaz have their own Eruv, and they say a lot of them that it is kosher, but it's a separate Eruv. There's two Eruvs, one for Sephardics and one for Ashkenaz.
okay, but that's because there's different in Yerushalayim also they have the Eidech Haredis that goes up to one street, and they have the general Eruv that goes through the whole city. That's all that's like that in other cities as well. That's okay to have additional restrictions, but in a case where there's no Eruv at all, and the things like this, if there's an Eruv, and the question is the level of how, so then it becomes less of a problem if a Gentile is pushing it. But if there's absolutely no Eruv, then it's talking about pushing something in a karmelis, and Rabbi Segal says it's forbidden. And it could be that would apply even in a case where there's an Eruv and you say it's not kosher. Rebecca.
So you might have discussed this in the very beginning when you first introduced, this whole chapter on about carrying on Shabbos, but what about carrying something that you're used to having with you during the week that there's a possibility you might not need it on Shabbos?
Say that again.
Like, what about I mean, obviously, we're talking about carrying something that you definitely need for Shabbos, but what about carrying something that there's a possibility that you might not end up needing it on Shabbos? Like, for example, like, I carry like a little gift bag with me on Shabbos to shul, to meals, whatever. So let's say I'm used to carrying my sunglasses with me, but I didn't check the weather before Shabbos, and I leave in the morning for shul, and I don't know that, like, it's supposed to rain later, so like I'm not even gonna need the sunglasses. Like, do you
Yeah,
understand what I
but
mean?
are you talking about wearing something or carrying something or air?
Carrying,
Ca
carrying in an Eruv.
Oh, in it. Oh, that's you mean carrying something in an Erev that you don't need it. Okay, that's another question that has to be asked. I remember when I was in Montreal, my brother got married, and anyone been in Montreal, I don't know, 8 months of the year. I don't mean to put down Montreal, but it's a pretty cold place. It literally was freezing, and we ate Shabbos in one place, and we had to walk back at home to our lodging in another place, and there was no Erev, and I think that was the question. There's no Erev, and the Rav, and some people are careful that men don't wear gloves on Shabbos. Women will wear it because it's kind of a clothing, but men wouldn't wear gloves on Shabbos because the concern is you may take off your gloves and carry. And same thing with sunglasses. There's certain things you have to be careful about. So if the Rav then said that in Montreal it's so cold that it's so unlikely you would take off your gloves while you're walking. So therefore, even men who wouldn't wear gloves usually could wear gloves then. Remember, that's what they pass now. I'll just tell you how cold it was. That I left a bottle of water in the car. We drove to the shul on Shabbos. When I came Saturday night to pick up the car, it was solid ice. So we're talking about real.
Wow.
So it's not like the water was cold, but it was ice, like it was in the freezer. So that's how cold it was, and therefore the Rav said that in such a scenario, then you don't have to be concerned that you take off the gloves because you would not take off your gloves. All right, everyone. Aaron, I hear what you're saying. Aaron, I have to check into more. We're not really learning the laws of Erevin but it is kind of crossing into it. I'm going to go more into that next class. I'm not sure when we do it next class. It's not probably next week. It's Rosh Hashanah. We'll try to catch in the class maybe during or before Sukkot. But I hear what you're saying about the opinion of the Erev versus having someone push for you in the Erev, even if you don't hold by it. But it's not the same thing as no Erev at all. So if you have, let's say, a Erev that's not halachically kosher, you have some times where you'll pick up a pamphlet in a city. I mean, I'll give you an example. One of the cities that they put an Erev in that was very controversial was London. And it was after I was married. My wife is from England, so when they made the Erev in London, so I'm not sure if it was the London Erev in general or if it was the Golders Green Erev, whatever it was, it became very hot topic of the Erev, and people put up pamphlets how it's not kosher. Although the person who put up the Erev, meaning to say sponsored it, brought in the Eidach Haredis. Eidach Haredis is mamish like the most from, but nevertheless they came out with all these rulings against using the Erev. Now, if so, in that case, that's different because there was kind of principle rules. It wasn't that people were questioning if it was kosher. Some people were saying it was kosher, some it wasn't kosher, but there was more a principle. They didn't want the Erev in Golders Green for whatever reason. I'm not going to get into the politics of it. That's different than saying the Erev is not kosher and therefore you're still in a public domain or a Carmelist. Yes, Rebecca.
Um, so I think I learned that you're not supposed to pick up, like, even to move it into your house, like a newspaper or a package or mail that
Yeah,
came
so
from
that,
Shabbos,
yeah, that
that
we're
came
gonna
on Shabbos,
absolutely so we're not going to the muksa question, but even as far as the Karen question, we're gonna
because
get.
it came from outside the Tchum or something, right?
There's that idea. This came out to Tchum. It's coming to the service for you. The question is also just picking up from your doorstep. Maybe taking from a Carmelist to again, because there's no Makom Patur in a Carmelist, it makes it much more difficult. If a person's outside their front door, most people, at least in America, they're outside your front door. Not talking about where Aaron lives in an apartment building or in a house. Outside your front door, usually most people don't. If you have that white picket fence, that kind of makes the front of your house an Erev. Most people have the fence, the permissible carrying space in the backyard. Let's say in Seattle. I'm going to give an example for Seattle. Very few people have an Erev in the front yard. They'll have an Erev in the backyard. Now, Seattle has an Erev in the whole area, so it's different. But let's say before the Erev was up, or in Bellevue, where my brother-in-law sister are. So they have a private domain, unless they put up a small Erev in their front yard, but they have a private domain in their backyard that's fenced in, but the front yard is open. So even if you're going to say, well, the paper is not really, it's on a Makom Patur, but it doesn't make a difference. There is no Makom Patur in a Carmelist. So therefore, to move any kind of thing from the outside to your house, it's moving it from a Carmelist. to a private domain. You're not allowed to pick up the paper from outside your front door to bring it in. It's a problem.
Ah, okay.
All right, gentlemen,
Thank
ladies
you.
and gentlemen, thank you so much. For those who are not going to see, and then we have, I think, 1 or 2 more classes before Rosh Hashanah. I want to wish everyone a ksiva v'chsima tova, good ben shiar, all the blessings and schus learning Hilchah Shabbos, and thank you, Barbara, for sponsoring the general class of Hilchah Shabbos. That should bring a lot of bracha. We know that learning the laws of Shabbos is a big deal. It brings a lot of bracha throughout the week. So this is a time of brachas, a time of Hashem benches everyone for everything they need. Those who need shidduchim should find shidduchim. Those who need parnasa should find parnasa. Those who need health should find health. And the ikar is we should have the main blessing of the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu b'mheira v'yameinu. Good Shabbos, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi. Ksiva v'chasima tova to you and your family.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Bye.